not going to claim that I know what I saw 100%, but in 2016, while backpacking through Three Sisters, Oregon, my fiancé and I definitely experienced something incredible. Incredible, but fucking terrifying. The trip we'd planned was likely to take us more than 4 days, so we planned for a safe 6. We started at the Obsidian Trailhead, one that you need a permit for, so often it's less busy but guaranteed parking and camping. North End is where we wanted to spend a good deal of our time. But we'd gotten a somewhat late start, so we knew we'd end up camping before we made it that far, so this trailhead was best. A little over an hour before sunset, we picked a spot near Hand Lake. Not too hidden, but off the trail enough to not be in the way. Almost as soon as we set up camp, we both decided to explore immediately around us. We'd absolutely picked a beautiful spot. To the east of our tent was a gorgeous open valley, which would make for an amazing sunrise. Then to the west were valleys of dense forest. While walking near the edge of the forest, maybe 25 feet from our tent, I noticed large clumps of what I thought initially was dead grass or dead pine needles. I asked my fiancé what he thought these clumps were. After a bit of silence, he says he doesn't know, but I watch as he picks one up and then immediately drops it. He has a disgusted look on his face and he's practically gagging. More nervous now, I ask him, "What is it?" Uncomfortably, he says, "It's fur, and it fucking stinks." Neither of us said much, but later I'd learned that we both considered moving our tent at that point, but sundown was maybe 20 minutes away. We'd never be able to make a move before sundown. Besides, within just a few moments, we were distracted by a little chipmunk family, and we started to really enjoy the sereneness of it all. It was like we had the whole valley to ourselves. The sun officially started to set, so we decided before we laid our heads down, we would use nature's bathroom. I didn't want to wander too far away from my fiancé, but we joked about being far enough as to not accidentally pee on each other. The mood was light. Then, it wasn't. I'd had to shush myself because I was still laughing to myself about earlier, but something compelled me to stop making noise. And when I did, it sounded like something heavy and large was making their way through the trees behind me. Before panicking, I remembered my fiancé was a bit behind me, or to the right of me. Maybe he was finding a new spot. But this didn't sound like my fiancé. It was heavier, and its footing, it seemed slow. I knew something was off about these steps, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I finished my business, and as I stood up, I could see my fiancé. He was in front of me, not behind me. And he didn't look good. He looked white as a ghost. Instinctually, I turn around quickly, expecting to see something, but I don't. My fiancé grabs my hand and we start walking quickly back to the camp. He pulls me in, whispering, "Something's out there. A bear? I don't know. It was tall and big, really big." Bears weren't impossible, but they were rare. We weren't quite to our tent when we heard something thunderous. It was the sound of a large tree or tree limb smashing to the ground, crashing in half, and falling hard just behind where we previously were. We stop in place. We duck behind a large rock surrounded by bushes. Despite being curious, I'm burying my head in my fiancé's arms as to try to get a grip and calm myself down. As I pull my eyes away and out into the world, I can see a large looming creature. It's a distance away, but it towers over in a way that I can see its back. not a bear. Still furry. So, an animal. There's no way this thing is on 4 legs. Far too tall. I realize the sounds haven't stopped. Large tree limbs snapping, but also being quickly picked up, followed by sounds of being dragged. We can see above us, tree limbs in the distance. They're falling and rising again with heavy thuds, and you can hear a sort of whip or whoosh in the air. The creature, got closer to us at one point, and I made the mistake of breathing. It took everything not to gag at the smell emanating from the other side of the bushes. Some sort of mixture between actual hot garbage and cow manure. I clenched my teeth so hard I could hear the grind, but I was just trying to stop breathing. At this point, not moving wasn't a problem. I was frozen, not even in the traditional sense. This was a sort of trance. It was almost calming, yet I knew it wasn't natural. What I couldn't do in that moment was look at my fiancé. I wasn't able to move my head or my body at all. At some point, the footsteps, the dragging of tree limbs, it all started to sound much further away. A shadow was no longer showing itself, and the creature itself was no longer visible from inside the bushes. I was suddenly moving my head and my limbs around, just to ensure that they still worked. They did. Still, we waited for a while. We stayed in the bushes long enough for the sun to set entirely, and then some. Finally, we decided to go back to our tent, slightly unprepared. The area was incredibly dark, and we'd only grabbed 2 small headlamps before making our initial quick walk around the area. We struggled to make it back without looking over our shoulders every couple moments. Once back, we realized how unfortunate it was to be in one of the areas which didn't allow for small campfires. It emphasized just how dark and just how alone we really were. Feeling a bit helpless, we dug out a few lanterns. We were stuck with only their weak glow as we got ourselves ready to try and sleep. Eating was entirely out of the question, as that smell lingered in my nostril for what felt like hours. We wouldn't get much sleep that night. We decided the rest of our trip we would stick with crowds or groups of people, or at least with camping. We'd try not to do it solo. We re-examined the clumps of fur from the previous day as we packed up the following morning. My fiancé eventually made a joke about how we should have bagged it up and had it tested. I told him that if he were to touch it again, the wedding was off. Somehow, we managed to have a light-hearted morning, but we would both later admit that we were pretty fucking terrified the entire trip. We'd only tried to make the best of it for each other. So, what do you think? Did we run into Bigfoot himself? Or a very stinky, very strange bear? I don't know. Help me out here. Again, this was Three Sisters, Oregon, in the Deschutes National Forest. Thanks for listening. Alright, so everybody with knowledge of cryptids. I'm hunting for information on a cryptid that I'm not sure has been marked down yet. There have been multiple sightings in my small town of Merrill, Michigan, something of which doesn't match a single cryptid I've read about, not yet, and I've read about a lot. I personally have not seen it, so I'm sorry for breaking that rule, but I have 3 witnesses that I would put my life on, and I really want to know what this thing is. The first witness is my uncle, and he's the main reason that I'm on this hunt. When he was young, he used to take night walks in the neighborhood woods, right before sunrise, as long as it was dark enough so the neighbors could see him. He would take a very dim flashlight with him on purpose, and if he thought someone saw him or was following him, he'd put his hand over it and hide in the woods' darkness. He claimed the main things that scared him were the raccoons and opossums. He never had problems with people on his walks, but he still knew the risk of trespassing. Though his story isn't very exciting, he got the best view of the creature out of all 3 witnesses, claiming that it only stood a few feet tall, and that it had legs bent backwards with large, fly-like eyes, and the rest of it looked like a kangaroo or monkey hybrid. There are many cryptids that are close in visuals, but none of them have this thick hair and big eyes like this one had. I showed him a drawing of other look-alike cryptids. He's dismissed every one of them. He claimed that he was walking out of the woods just as it was getting brighter. The sky was gray and the woods still dark from the trees, but the road was almost visible down the whole mile. On his way across the road back to the house, he saw that thing a little ways down the road. It's said to have crossed the road in 2 steps, despite being short, and disappearing into the woods my uncle had just exited. The second witness is deceased now. He was a natural conspiracist, so it came as no surprise when I heard this story years ago. Though his description was less valuable, I have the belief that this was the same cryptid. A couple of miles from the first incident, this man said that he had seen a small, ape-like figure, and that it jumped almost to the top of the trees. This is the least resourceful sighting, because I cannot ask the man to answer anything he left out, or to give more info. This is all I have for this sighting. The third is my grandma's good friend, Sylvia, from a state away. Every 4th of July, they park a camper in my grandma's yard and stay for a week or 2 to visit all the friends and family they left behind when they moved out of state. Keep in mind, these folk have never seen or even heard the stories about this creature. And for this story, I was in the house when it happened. Sylvia's husband had a few beers with my grandparents. There's a big tree on the side of a barely used road, and he walked over to it to use the bathroom. As he was peeing on this tree, he noticed the same big black bug eyes that my uncle had seen. It was staring him down from the tree line across the road. And as soon as he focused on it, the cryptid backed up into the brush and was gone. Me and my uncle freaked out about this, as you would, because it had been 6 years or so since someone that we knew spotted the thing. As crazy as it sounds, me and my whole family believe and know this creature to be real. We've even narrowed down where it possibly calls home, based on how far the sightings go. Sorry for the long and many paragraph story, but if you have any idea what might be lurking around mid-Michigan, please leave a name of a cryptid or description or drawing. My family and me all want to know what so many of us have seen. Any ideas?